The first thing Sable ever heard from a horse was an insult. She was 7 years old. She was standing in her father's mill yard. Then the merchant's draft horse swung his enormous head toward her and said, clear as rainfall inside her skull, "Your braid is crooked. Someone should fix that." She hadn't screamed. She hadn't told anyone. She simply reached up, undid her braid, and redid it. Because even at 7, Sable understood something instinctively. Some gifts were the kind you kept very quiet about. 16 years later, she was still keeping it quiet. She stood at the edge of the crowd lining Calder's Gate. A hoof-pick was tucked in her coat pocket. She watched King Cavan of Ironhallow ride through the city. He was coming back from 6 weeks at the Northern Front, in full triumphant procession. The crowd was cheering, but their enthusiasm wasn't real. They were only cheering because they were told to. Banners cracked and rolled in the sharp autumn wind. Some child threw flower petals that immediately blew into a neighboring woman's face. The king looked, she had to admit, exactly like a king was supposed to look. He sat straight in the saddle. He looked completely at ease. It seemed he had been riding since before he could even walk. His dark auburn hair caught the pale light. "He's holding his breath," said a voice like dark smoke inside her head. Sable pressed her lips together. Ajax, she thought back, with the focused attention she had developed for directing her communication. Not right now. "I'm just observing," said Ajax, the king's gray destrier, from somewhere ahead in the procession. "He does this at every public entrance. He holds his breath for the first 30 seconds, Ajax grumbled, just to make his stomach look flatter. Plus, he ate 4 portions of venison this morning. I felt every single one of them on the ride down." The laugh punched out of her before she could stop it. A short, sharp sound, quickly bitten off, but the crowd had gone respectfully hushed, and in that silence it carried. The king's head turned. His eyes swept the gathered crowd with practiced precision. Then they landed on her. She was a young woman in a worn brown coat at the back of the crowd. One hand was clapped over her mouth. She tried hard to hold back her laugh. Because of the effort, her eyes were watering slightly. He looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then he looked away. Sable exhaled through her nose. "Interesting," Ajax said, in the tone of someone dropping a stone into still water and watching the rings. She turned and walked back toward the royal stables without waiting to see the procession reach the gate. Behind her, distantly, Ajax continued, "Strong jaw, though. I'll give him that. Very architectural." The stables at Ironhallow were the finest in the 4 kingdoms, which meant they were warmer than the servants' hall, better lit than the guard barracks, and smelled incomparably better than the great hall on feast nights when the kitchen went heavy on the fish. Sable had made peace with this within her first week. She had her own room off the tack corridor, small, slightly drafty, at the east corner, but hers. She had her work, which she was good at. She had 43 horses with distinct personalities, strong opinions, and absolutely no conception of privacy. She had learned their names within the first 3 days, not the formal registry names, but the ones they called themselves. The blood-bay stallion in stall 4 called himself Devastation upon the field. He was terrified of geese, and had not processed this contradiction. The silver mare in stall 9 called herself Lady of Endless Skies. She had kicked 2 grooms, and considered this an achievement. Ajax called himself Ajax, because Ajax was a horse who had long since moved beyond the need for drama. He was the king's horse. That was sufficient. He was also, without question, the most opinionated living creature Sable had ever encountered in 23 years of encountering living creatures. She was picking out his hooves when the stable doors opened and Cavan of Ironhallow walked in. She heard the quality of it before she saw him, the particular shift in atmosphere that accompanied certain people, the way the stable air seemed to reorganize itself, the way even Devastation upon the field went briefly, uncharacteristically still. "Oh," Ajax said. "Here we go." Sable kept working. She was a stable hand. Omega ranked, 3rd month of employment, no particular reason to stop what she was doing and every reason to keep her expression carefully neutral. You. The king's voice was exactly what she'd expected from a man who had spent 28 years never having to raise it. Low, controlled, carrying the effortless resonance of someone whose words landed regardless of volume. You were in the crowd at Calder's Gate. Sable straightened and turned around. Up close, without the crowd and the banners and the processional horse between them, he was taller than she'd registered. Broader through the shoulders. The jaw was, she noted privately, extremely well structured whether practiced or not. His eyes were the color of winter fog, pale gray with something shifting underneath, and they were fixed on her with the concentrated attention of a man who had spent years identifying problems. She was, apparently, currently a problem. Yes, Your Majesty, she said. You laughed. I apologize, Your Majesty. A pause. He studied her the way she had seen him study the crowd, systematically, looking for the thing he wasn't seeing. What was funny? Tell him, Ajax suggested cheerfully. Tell him about the venison. A private thought, Your Majesty. The pale eyes narrowed slightly. He moved further into the stable, crossing to Ajax's stall with the ease of deep habit. And Ajax turned his great gray head and pressed his nose briefly against the king's shoulder. 9 years, Ajax said, quieter. He still comes himself. I'll give him that. Cavan's hand moved along Ajax's neck, and something happened to his face. The controlled authority softened at the edges. Just a fraction. Just enough to see if you were standing close and paying attention. Sable was always paying attention. You're the one they hired from Halvanmere, Cavan said, not looking at her. The Omega from the southern mill towns. Yes, Your Majesty. Your file says you have an unusual affinity with difficult animals. That's one way to put it, Ajax observed. I'm patient, Sable said. And I listen. He glanced at her then. Most people in my stables are patient. Most people are patient with the horses they like, she said. I'm patient with all of them. Something shifted in his expression. Recalibration. Ajax doesn't allow most people to handle him. I allow everyone to handle me, Ajax said. I simply make it unpleasant for the ones who don't pay attention. She pays attention. He's direct about what he wants, Sable said carefully. Once you learn to read it. Cavan was quiet. He was still looking at Ajax, but she could feel the awareness of her in the room, the specific kind of attention that pretends to be elsewhere. What does he want? The king asked. Long grooming sessions, proper conversation, not being used as furniture for political performance. Slow work, Sable said, starting at the withers, not the neck. And he prefers the wide-tooth comb for his mane, the fine-tooth pulls. A beat of silence. Most people don't know that, Cavan said. Most people aren't watching him, she said. They're watching you. It came out more directly than she'd intended. She saw him process it, the slight flicker of surprise, and then, briefly, something that looked almost like relief. He left without another word. Ajax waited until the stable doors had closed. Well, he said, he'll be back tomorrow. He visits you every day. He'll be back tomorrow, Ajax repeated, and he'll pretend it's about the feed rotation. I've seen this before. He gets a particular look. Like a man who has spotted something he wants and hasn't yet figured out that wanting it doesn't automatically close the distance. Sable went back to the grooming. She did not think about pale gray eyes or a jaw that caught autumn light or the way a king's face went unguarded when he touched his horse's neck. She thought about it, a little, for the rest of the evening. He came back the next day, and the day after that. By the end of the week, King Cavan of Ironhallow had developed a habit of appearing in the royal stables at irregular hours, in various stages of formal undress, with increasingly transparent reasons for being there. Ajax found this genuinely funny. He changed his shirt twice, the horse reported on the fourth morning, while Sable oiled a bridle and Cavan stood approximately 2 stalls away, pretending to inspect a halter he had clearly never inspected before. The first was too formal. He said so out loud to himself in the dressing room. The second was too plain. This is the third. He spent 11 minutes on it. Sable kept her eyes on the leather. Does the third one work? She thought. It makes him look like he's trying to seem approachable, which is different from actually being approachable. But his arms are good. I'll give him the arms. You're from Halvanmere, Cavan said, setting down the halter he'd been pretending to examine. The Mill District. Yes, Your Majesty. Your family stayed there when you took the position? My mother manages the accounts. My father runs the East Grindstones. She paused. Omegas don't require a family escort to accept employment, Your Majesty. Something moved across his face. Not offense. Something more like honest surprise. The expression of a man encountering a gap in his own understanding and recognizing it. No, he said. They don't. He didn't know that, Ajax said. He's been king since he was 22. He knows a great deal about territory lines and grain yields and military logistics, and almost nothing about how people actually live inside the kingdom he runs. He knows. He doesn't know. That's the thing about him. He knows the shape of what's missing. It keeps him awake. Sable looked up from the tack. Cavan was watching her with the focused, problem-solving expression. In the warm dimness of the stable, without the crown and the ceremony and the 40,000 things he had to be, he looked, not younger, exactly, but less armored, like a man standing still in the one place he didn't have to perform. Why did you laugh? He asked again. At Calder's Gate. A private thought. You said that before. It's still true. You're not afraid of me. Not accusatory, genuinely observational. The faint bewilderment of a man who had grown accustomed to a specific response and was not receiving it. Should I be? Sable asked. A long pause. He doesn't know how to answer, Ajax said. He wants to say yes because that's what maintains the distance. He also wants to say no because he wants you to keep looking at him exactly the way you're looking at him right now. Like what? Sable murmured. Barely a sound. Cavan blinked. I didn't say anything. I know, she agreed. She went back to the bridle. After a moment, she heard him exhale, quiet, slightly off rhythm, and then the soft fall of his boots as he moved to Ajax's stall and stayed there for 27 minutes. She counted. The mate bond arrived on a Thursday morning between the first and second feedings, while Sable was carrying a bucket of grain down the center aisle. She had not been bracing for it. She had not been bracing for anything. She was 23 years old, Omega ranked, employed at the royal stables, and the universe did not, in her accumulated experience, arrange fated destinies for Omega stable hands from mill towns. She rounded the corner at the aisle's midpoint. Cavan came from the opposite direction. Neither of them had time to stop. His arm shot up and caught her before the bucket could tip. His hand closed around her forearm. The world stopped. Not metaphor. Not imagination. The world actually held, like the suspended silence before thunder, like the moment at the top of a wave before it breaks. Everything in her went perfectly still. The bond hit like a door opening into a lit room. She felt it first in her chest. Warmth, and beneath the warmth, recognition so complete it bypassed thought and went straight to something older and wordless. Her wolf, practical and quiet, not given to theatrics, went absolutely motionless inside her, and then said, in a voice Sable had never heard from her before, "Oh, there he is." Cavan had gone very still. His hand was still on her arm. His eyes had come to her face, and the expression she found there was nothing she had seen from him before. Not the controlled authority, not the careful distance, not the performed version of anything. Something stripped and stunned and entirely unmanaged. "Oh," Ajax said, from the far end of the aisle. "Oh, finally." Sable. Before this goes further, there is something important you should know. Ajax. Left side. There's a mark. Ajax, heart-shaped, he finished, with the satisfaction of a creature who had been waiting to deploy this information. Just preparing you. You'll see it eventually. I'm being responsible. The bucket was still in her hand. Grain was trickling through a gap in her grip and scattering across the floor. "You," Cavan said, and his voice had lost its careful control entirely, coming out rough, almost wondering. "You're—" "I know," Sable said. He blinked. "You know, I can feel it." Silence. His hand was still on her arm. Neither of them moved. "He practiced a speech," Ajax said, with enormous personal delight. "He's had it prepared for years. For this exact moment. Very sweeping. Lots of references to the moon and destiny and the ancient bond of wolves. It starts with, let me recall. Ah, yes. From the moment the stars aligned our bloodlines." Sable looked at Cavan's face, at the stunned, unmoored expression of a man whose carefully prepared speech had just been rendered completely irrelevant by reality. She fought the laugh. She thought about difficult things. Feed inventory. Winter tax records. The time she'd backed directly into the head stable master carrying a full pail of... It didn't matter. The laugh built anyway. It escaped. Not a small one. A real one. Warm and helpless, doubling her forward so she had to set the bucket down before she dropped it entirely. Cavan stared at her. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I'm not... It isn't... I'm sorry." "What?" he said, with the careful patience of a man maintaining dignity under pressure. "Is funny. Nothing. Nothing, I promise. It's just a lot. All at once." He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Ajax. Ajax looked back at him with the serene expression of a horse who had nothing to hide, and also everything to hide. "He's doing something," Cavan said slowly. "Isn't he?" Sable pressed her lips together. "My horse," Cavan said, "is doing something, and you can tell, and that's why you keep laughing at me. He says you had a speech prepared." The silence that followed was total. He does not know about the speech. He says it starts with, "From the moment the stars aligned." A different silence. Deeper. Also, Ajax added helpfully, "Tell him I know about the window incident." "He also says he knows about the window incident," Sable said, because she had nothing left to lose. Cavan turned to look at his horse with an expression of profound, personal betrayal. Ajax tossed his mane. Feed was scattered across the stable floor. The mate bond hummed warm and certain in Sable's chest. She stood in the royal stables of Ironhallow and laughed until her eyes watered, and the king of Ironhallow stood beside her looking like a man whose entire carefully constructed image had just been gently, thoroughly, and quite irreversibly taken apart. "Welcome to the family," Ajax said. The news moved through Ironhallow Castle the way news always moved. Kitchens first, then the guard rotations, then the council chambers, gaining weight and drama at each transition. By evening, everyone knew the king had found his fated mate. By morning, everyone knew she was the Omega stable hand from Halvanmere. Sable learned about her own situation secondhand, from the horses, who had heard it from the castle hounds, who had been eavesdropping on the servants' hall with the dedication of creatures who had finally found a purpose. The head cook says you used a working, reported devastation upon the field, who was afraid of geese but felt no particular hesitation about delivering bad news. Says no Omega from the mill towns gets a king without some kind of charm involved. "Thank you," Sable said. "That's extremely helpful." The Grey Mare in the West Wing says the council has already convened. Also very helpful. Ajax says to tell you he regrets mentioning the window incident. He thinks the first day may have been too much. Sable paused her work. "Tell Ajax the window incident was the best part." From 4 stalls away, Ajax made a sound that was as close to a laugh as a horse could produce. The council meeting lasted 4 hours. She learned this, not from Cavan, she didn't see him until the following afternoon, but from Ajax, who had been positioned near the council wing's exterior wall during his morning exercise, and caught fragments through the stone. "The one with the gray beard says you're a strategic weakness," Ajax reported while Sable brushed him. "No bloodlines, no political ties, no court training." He used the word liability 4 times. I counted. "He's not entirely wrong," Sable said. "He's completely wrong," Ajax said, with a firmness that surprised her. "A king who can't choose his own mate is weaker than any bloodline gap could make him. I've watched Cavan for 9 years. He's been carrying this throne alone since he was 22, and he's been performing strength so long he's forgotten what actual strength feels like. He needs someone who isn't performing back at him. The Greybeard doesn't understand that because the Greybeard has never once told Cavan anything true." Sable was quiet for a moment. "You've been watching out for him," she said. "I'm his horse," Ajax said, as though this explained everything, because to him it did. Cavan came to the stables that afternoon with the look of a man who had been in rooms with difficult people for a very long time and was operating on the structural minimum of patience. He stopped when he saw her, and some of the tension across his shoulders released, involuntarily, automatic, the way a clenched hand opens when the cause of the clenching disappears. "He does that every time he sees you," Ajax said quietly. "He doesn't know he does it." Sable kept her expression neutral. "The council wants to meet you," Cavan said, in the tone of someone announcing a formal unpleasantness. "I assumed. They'll ask about your bloodline. Your pack standing. Your—" He stopped, set his jaw. "They're going to be difficult about it. I grew up the youngest of 5 in a mill town with 4 older brothers and a mother who ran the accounts during the winter grain rush," Sable said. "I know difficult." Something in his expression shifted. "You're not worried." "I'm terrified," she said honestly. "But those are different things. Worried means you think something might go wrong. Terrified means you know it might, and you're going to do it anyway." He looked at her for a long time, the pale gray eyes doing the recalibrating thing, like she kept providing answers that hadn't matched the questions he'd prepared. "He wants to say something," Ajax observed. "Something that isn't king language. He's trying to find the version of it that's actually honest." "I should have come to find you yesterday," Cavan said, after the bond. "The council ran long, and then the border dispatches, and I—" A pause. "I should have come. It wasn't a formal apology. It was something more costly than that. An admission." "You're here now," Sable said. He nodded. Then, with the careful deliberateness of a man doing something he hadn't had much practice at, "Are you all right?" 9 years, Ajax said softly. I've never once heard him ask anyone that. "I'm all right," Sable said. "Ask me again. After the council meeting?" The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "The architecture of one." "Fair enough," he said. The council chamber was built to make everyone seated at the long table feel significant, and everyone standing before it feel small. Sable stood before it in her best dress, clean, well-made, and entirely not what a future queen was traditionally supposed to wear, and looked at 8 faces arranged along a spectrum from skeptical to openly resolved. The gray-bearded one was Lord Renwick. She had gotten this from Ajax, who had gotten it from his own horse, an anxious bay cob who spent most of his time managing general existential worry, and had provided a detailed behavioral assessment of every council member within the first 15 minutes of being asked. Renwick's horse says he's held his position for 32 years and has never once reconsidered a formed opinion, the bay had reported. He decided what he thought about everything sometime in his late 40s and has been defending those positions ever since. Cavan sat at the head of the table, full formal, crown, cloak, the practiced jaw, king mode, complete and unassailable. But she could feel the bond between them, a low, warm thread, and through it the tension He wasn't showing. Lord Renwick folded his hands. Miss Sable of Halvanmere, you carry no pack standing above Omega rank. Your family holds no territory and no seat of influence. You have no diplomatic training, no knowledge of court protocol, no political alliances to offer. He paused. Can you provide this council with a single reason why you are a suitable mate for the King of Ironhallow? The chamber was very quiet. Sable thought about Ajax. He needs someone who isn't performing back at him. She thought about Cavan asking, quietly, if she was all right. She thought about 9 years of a horse watching out for a man who had no one else willing to be honest with him. No, she said. Renwick blinked. He had not expected that. I have no bloodline argument, Sable continued. No alliance to offer, no territory to bring to the table. If you're looking for a queen who strengthens Ironhallow through political connection, I'm not her. A pause. But I can tell you that your king has been holding this throne alone since he was 22, and in 3 months of working in his stables, I have understood more about what he actually needs than I believe this council has arrived at in 9 years of meeting around this table. The quality of the silence changed. And what? Renwick said carefully. Does the king need? Someone who tells him the truth, Sable said. Someone who isn't performing for him. Someone who can see him without the crown and is neither frightened by what they see nor calculating how to use it. She held Renwick's gaze steadily. With respect, my lord, that isn't something a bloodline provides. At the head of the table, Cavan went very still. His pulse just changed, Ajax said. From somewhere outside the castle walls, his range apparently infinite when he had something important to report. That sound, I've only heard it twice before. Once when he won his first major engagement. Once when he lost his father. Sable kept her eyes on Renwick. The old lord studied her for a long time. Then he looked at the king. Then back at her. You are not what I expected, he said finally. No. Sable agreed. I don't think I am. The meeting continued for another hour and a half. It was not comfortable. But when it ended, Renwick had not filed a formal objection, which Renwick's horse informed the anxious bay cob was the first time in 32 years the man had declined to formally object to anything. Cavan walked her out of the council wing himself. 3 separate servants stopped and stared. You told them no, he said, when they were in the corridor. I told them the truth. That's not typical council behavior. I noticed. He was quiet for a few paces. She could feel the bond between them, warm, steady. What you said in there, about what I need. Yes, you meant it. Every word. A longer pause. No one has... He stopped, began again. It's been a long time since anyone said anything like that about me, to my face. 9 years, Ajax said quietly, give or take. Sable looked at the king beside her. The crown and the practiced jaw and the cloak, and underneath all of it, the man who came to the stables every afternoon and stood next to his horse because it was the one place he didn't have to hold everything together. I know, she said softly. He looked at her sharply. How could you... Ajax, she said. A pause. Of course, Cavan said, with the resigned clarity of a man accepting something. Ajax! The courtship happened mostly in the stables, which surprised no one who had been paying attention. He brought her things. Not grand gestures, not at first. A small jar of the good honey from the castle's winter stores. A pair of leather work gloves cut to actually fit, because he'd noticed hers had worn through at the thumb and 2 fingers. A slim book on the seasonal migration of forest birds through the southern territories, because she'd mentioned once, briefly, in passing, that she'd always wanted to understand why the starlings moved in the patterns they did. He spent 40 minutes in the castle library choosing it, Ajax reported, while Sable turned the book carefully in her hands, asked the librarian for a recommendation. When she said she didn't know you, he described you for nearly a quarter of an hour. He described me to the librarian, Sable said. He said you were the most honest person he'd encountered in years. He said you looked at him as though you were actually seeing him, not what he represented. He said, A pause. He said he didn't know what to do with that, but he didn't want to stop being near it. She held the book carefully. He told his librarian that. He tells Ajax things too, the horse said. He thinks I don't understand him. He's been wrong about that for 9 years. Cavan appeared in the stable doorway 20 minutes later, in what she had come to recognize as his third shirt, wearing the expression of a man attempting to look as though he had no particular destination in mind. Sable held up the book. Thank you, he nodded, moving to Ajax with the ease of reflex. The librarian said the chapter on starling murmurations is the strongest. She told you that? I asked. Sable watched him run a hand along Ajax's neck. Ajax leaned into it slightly, the way he only did with people he trusted. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. The speech. She kept her voice even. The one you had prepared. Did you actually want to say it, ever? Or was it something you felt you were supposed to have ready? A long silence. Good question, Ajax said. Cavan looked at Ajax, then at her. Both, he said. I think both. Another pause. I've been king since I was 22. I learned very early that there's an expected version of every moment, the right words for it, the right posture, the right... He stopped. I've been performing the expected version of things for so long that I've lost track of what the other version would look like. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her. She could feel it through the bond, the slight exposure of it, the small cost of saying it out loud to another person. What would the other version look like? She asked. Right now, if you weren't performing. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, I'd tell you that I've been coming to these stables every day for 2 weeks, for reasons that have nothing to do with the feed schedule. And I think you already know that. And I'd tell you that you're the only person I've been around in years who makes me feel like I don't have to hold every single thing together, every single second. And I don't know what to do with that. But I don't want it to stop. The stable was very quiet. There it is, Ajax said softly. That's the real speech. Sable looked at the king of Ironhallow, who had just put the truest thing he knew how to say down on the table between them, and was watching her with the expression of a man who wasn't sure if it would hold. That's better than the star speech, she said. Something in his face broke open. Small, genuine, irreversible. Ajax told you how it started. He was very precise about it. Cavan looked at his horse with the long-suffering expression of a man confronting a 9-year betrayal. Ajax regarded him with complete serenity. 9 years, Cavan said. And this is what you do with it. You're welcome, Ajax said, in Sable's head. She laughed, and this time Cavan didn't look confused by the laugh. He looked at her laughing, and his expression went quiet and certain, the way the bond had felt in that first moment in the aisle, like recognition. Like there you are. The banquet was Lady Isolde's idea, or rather, it was Isolde's father's idea, executed through Isolde, who had the kind of beauty built for rooms like this and the kind of intelligence that rooms like this routinely underestimated. She was the eldest daughter of the most powerful lord in the Western Territories. She had been positioned near Cavan for 3 years. She had not, until 3 months ago, had serious competition. Sable learned this from the horses, specifically from Isolde's mare, a pale champagne creature named Vesper, who had strong opinions about everything and an exceptional gift for social observation. She's been rehearsing her entrance for 2 days, Vesper reported, while Sable groomed her the morning of the banquet. The gown has a train. She's timed the crossing of the Great Hall at 11 seconds. She wants him to have 11 uninterrupted seconds to watch her. That's genuinely strategic, Sable said. She's not stupid, Vesper agreed. She's just been playing a game you didn't know you'd entered. The Great Hall was everything the stables were not. High vaulted ceilings, 300 candles, the smell of roasted meat and expensive wine, and approximately 240 people arranged in the careful formations of court social structure that Sable was still in the early stages of learning. She understood them better than anyone realized because the castle hounds had been circulating all evening. A small terrier named Fig had attached himself to her ankles with the devotion of a convert and had been providing running commentary for the past hour. The Lord in the burgundy doublet has told 4 separate people that the king will come to his senses within the season, Fig reported. He's on his 5th cup of wine. He gets louder with each one. Noted. The lady near the east pillar is asking about your family's pack ranking. She's writing it down. Also noted. The tall one by the doors thinks your dress is very well cut. That one I'm keeping. The dress was winter blue, simply made, with a small silver clasp at the shoulder in the shape of a running wolf. It had appeared on her cot 2 days prior with no note. When she'd thanked Cavan, he'd said only that the seamstress had mentioned she had one good gown, and he'd thought she might want another. He agonized over the clasp design, Ajax had told her. 40 minutes deciding between 2 options. I'm not going to tell you which one he didn't choose, because that would be too much. Cavan found her near the edge of the hall, back to the wall, clear view of the room. You positioned yourself tactically, he said. 4 older brothers, she said. The corner of his mouth moved. He looked at the dress, just briefly, and then at her face, and something in his expression settled. You got it, he said. There was no note. I couldn't thank you. That was the point. He was afraid it was too much, Ajax said, from the stables. He told me this morning. He went back and forth about it for 3 days. You told Ajax you weren't sure if it was too much, Sable said. Cavan closed his eyes briefly. He told you that. He tells me everything. I'm becoming aware of that. He looked at her. The torchlight caught the gray of his eyes and made them warmer. You look... He stopped. Started again with visible deliberateness. You look beautiful. Not the moon speech, not the stars-aligned speech, just the words, simply, without the practiced jaw or the controlled distance. Thank you, she said, just as simply. Something settled between them, quiet and real. Then Lady Isolde made her entrance. 11 seconds, across the full width of the great hall, in a gown the exact gold of the Ironhallow crest. The train moved perfectly. Her chin was at precisely the right angle. Her smile, when it arrived on Cavan, was warm and practiced and entirely convincing. Your Majesty! Her voice carried precisely far enough. You look well. The northern campaign clearly suited you. Cavan inclined his head. Lady Isolde, you know Sable. It was a small thing, the way he said it. You know Sable. Not this as the stable hand or the Omega from Halvanmere. Just her name, placed beside his with the ease of something that had always belonged there. Isolde's smile didn't waver. She was far too skilled for that. But her eyes moved to Sable with a careful, assessing quality that had nothing to do with warmth. Of course, Isolde said. The stable girl. A perfectly timed pause. How lovely that you could attend. That dress is charming. Is it new? She knows it's new, Vesper reported from the stables. She knows who gave it to you. She's making certain the people nearest you know she knows. It was a gift, Sable said. How generous. Isolde's attention returned to Cavan with the smooth efficiency of someone who had been practicing social redirection since childhood. I was hoping to speak with you about the Western grain levies. My father has concerns about the new assessment structure. She doesn't actually care about the levies, Vesper said. She's been coached on them, so she has a reason to occupy his attention. Her father cares about the levies. She cares about standing close enough to the king that people start associating them again. Cavan glanced at Sable, a brief, checking glance. She gave him the smallest nod. Go. It's fine. He went, because he was the king. And the Western grain levies were a real problem, and Lord Renwick was already moving toward them, with the expression of a man who had opinions about assessments. Sable watched them cross the room. You're not angry, Fig observed from near her feet. No, why not? Because he looked back, she said. He had. twice before he reached the far side of the hall. The trouble began near the dessert table, which Sable had been visiting with the focused appreciation of someone who had grown up watching her mother's bakery operate through winter market season and had formed strong opinions about pastry as a result. The castle's head baker was talented. The honeyed fig tarts were excellent. The spiced apple cake was doing something interesting with anise that she wanted to think about further. She was thinking about anise when she became aware of two women positioned nearby, not speaking to her, but speaking at a volume precisely calibrated for her to hear. "Can't imagine what he's thinking," the first said. "An Omega, from a mill town." "No bloodline," the second agreed. "No training. She doesn't even know the formal address protocols I watched her greet Lord Renwick this afternoon." A small, surgical pause. "It was quite sweet." "They're doing it deliberately," Fig reported. Sable set down the tart. "The bond is the bond," the first continued. "But surely he could petition the Elder Council for a formal review. It's been done before, when the match is clearly unsuitable." The word landed exactly the way it was meant to. Sable thought about what Ajax had said. He needs someone who isn't performing back at him. She thought about Cavan's face in the corridor, admitting he should have come sooner. She thought about what she actually had. Not bloodlines, not protocols, not 11 seconds of practiced entrance. She turned to face them. Both women wore the composed, pleasant expression of people who had said something cutting and were waiting to observe the damage. "You're right," Sable said pleasantly. "I don't know the formal address protocols. I've been learning them, but I make mistakes." A pause. "I also don't know the correct precedence order for a state dinner, or which water glass is removed before the fish course, or how long a formal mourning period lasts for a second cousin of the crown." She let that sit. "But I do know that Lord Renwick's horse has been favoring his left foreleg for nearly 2 weeks, and if his stable master doesn't poultice it by tomorrow, he'll be lame by the weekend. And I know that the bay gelding belonging to Lord Harwick in the North Tower has been refusing feed for 3 days, which is usually the early sign of colic, and if no one addresses it tonight, Lord Harwick will be walking to his next council meeting." She smiled. "I'm going to go tell the stable master now. The anise cake is excellent. I'd recommend it." She walked away. Behind her, silence. Not the loaded silence of social maneuvering, just silence. "That," said Fig, trotting at her heels, "was very well done." "Thank you, Fig. You didn't raise your voice once." "Raising your voice tells people they got to you," Sable said. "My mother taught me that. She ran a bakery through 12 consecutive winter markets. You learn." She found the stable master near the side corridor and told him about Renwick's horse and Harwick's gelding. He looked at her with the expression of a man uncertain whether to be grateful or unsettled, then went immediately to check, because the horses were his responsibility, and he wasn't going to discard a specific warning out of principle. She was standing in the outer corridor, breathing the cooler air, when Cavan appeared. He had extracted himself from the levee conversation with some effort. His expression had the particular quality of a man who had been diplomatically patient for several hours and was near the structural limit. "You left the hall," he said. "I needed air." He came to stand beside her. Close. She could feel the warmth of him. "What happened?" "Nothing dramatic." "Sable." She looked at him. "2 women said I was unsuitable. I told them about Renwick's horse and Harwick's gelding, and then I recommended the apple cake." A pause. "The anise is genuinely very good." He was quiet for a moment. "You used your ability." "I used the truth," she said, "which is what I have. I don't have bloodlines or court protocols or 11 seconds of practiced entrance across a great hall. I have the truth, and I have the animals." She paused. "And Fig. Fig has been extremely useful tonight." Cavan looked down. Fig was sitting on Sable's left foot, gazing upward with the expression of a small dog who had found his singular purpose. That dog, Cavan said, belongs to Lord Renwick. I know. Renwick's horse mentioned it. Fig has been attending council meetings for months. He finds them riveting. Cavan stared at her. Then, slowly, genuinely, he laughed. Not the polished social sound he produced for banquet rooms, but something real and slightly unguarded. The laugh of a man who had just understood that his fated mate had been running an intelligence network through the castle animals for 3 months without anyone being the wiser. You, he said, when he could speak again, are the most unexpected person I have ever met. Is that good or bad? I genuinely don't know, he said, but I don't want it to stop. It was the second time he'd said that. She didn't think it was an accident. Level 3, Ajax announced from the stables. Possibly 4. I'm revising my assessment upward. What's level 4? Sable murmured. Cavan raised an eyebrow. Ajax? He has a rating system, she said. For romantic progress. Of course he does. He looked at the ceiling briefly. What's level 4? He just said he's revising upward. He hasn't defined it yet. Level 4, Ajax clarified, is when he stops pretending he's in a given location for any reason other than you. Sable looked at Cavan. Cavan looked at Sable. He says, she said carefully, that level 4 is when you stop pretending you're wherever you are for any reason other than me. The corridor was quiet. He's not wrong, Cavan said, and he wasn't performing it. No practiced jaw, no controlled distance, no star alignment speech, just a king standing in a corridor outside his own banquet, telling the truth to the one person he'd found who actually wanted it. Sable felt the bond settle deeper, like a root finding water, like something that had always been meant to reach this point. Come back inside, she said. Lord Renwick is going to want to talk about his horse's leg, and you should be there when he does. You're managing my council relationships through veterinary medicine. I'm managing your council relationships through the truth, she said. The animals are just how I get to it. He offered her his arm. She took it. They walked back into the hall together, and if Lady Isolde noticed the way the king moved through the crowd now, angled slightly toward the woman beside him, his attention returning to her the way a compass needle returns to north, she gave no outward sign. But Vesper noticed. She's recalculating, the mayor reported. She hasn't given up, but she's recalculating. Sable filed it away. The evening wasn't finished yet. The threat arrived on a Friday, which Sable would later consider extremely inconsiderate timing. She was in the East Yard watching Ajax's morning exercise when Vesper's distress reached her. Not words at first, just feeling. Fear, shame, and the particular anguish of an animal who knows something wrong is happening and cannot stop it. Vesper, Sable directed. Tell me. The images came fast and incomplete. A letter. Isolde's hands, trembling slightly. A wax seal Sable didn't recognize. Fragments of words. The omega must be removed. The king's weakness, sufficient for a council vote. She didn't write it, Vesper said, and her distress was entirely genuine. She received it. Someone sent it to her. Someone who wants to use her as the instrument. Who sent it? I don't know his name. But his horse came through the north gate 2 days ago. A dark roan. He's still stabled here. Mean eyes. The kind that comes from a long time of being afraid. Sable stood still in the morning light. Does Isolde know what they're actually planning? She knows they want you removed. She wants that too. But she thinks it's political maneuvering, leverage, pressure. She doesn't know what they're willing to do. She thinks it's a game of the kind she knows. She doesn't know it's... Vesper stopped. The roan is very afraid of his rider. Deeply afraid. That kind of fear. Sable went to find Ajax. His name is Crest, Ajax said when she described the roan. He belongs to a man called Martin Voss. A broker, he moves between packs selling information, arranging instabilities. He's been hired before to fracture successions before they consolidate. What does he have? I don't know yet, but Crest is in the far south block. If you go to him, that kind of fear doesn't want to stay silent forever. It just needs someone to ask. The roan was in the last stall of the south block, and Vesper had been right about his eyes. They were the eyes of an animal who had concluded, some time ago, that safety was not something the world offered. Sable stood at the stall door and said nothing. Just let him feel her. Let him understand that she wasn't going to push. After a long moment, he came to the door. You can hear me, he said. Not a question. Yes, he's going to use the gold woman. The roan's voice was flat and factual, the voice of an animal that had been carrying information for too long. Make it look like something exists between her and the king. He has a letter. He wrote it himself, in the king's hand. He's been practicing the king's signature for months. He's going to present it to the council as evidence of a private arrangement. That the king has been conducting something with the lord's daughter all along. That you were brought in as a cover. Sable's blood went cold. He's going to move, tonight, Crest continued. Second bell. He has 3 council members already. Enough for a formal review motion. Enough to have you removed before the king can act. Where is the letter? His rooms. North Tower. 2nd floor. Inside the lining of his document case. The black one with the brass clasps. He checks it every few hours. A pause. I've carried him for 2 years. I've been waiting for someone who could hear me. Sable placed her hand flat against the stall door. Thank you, she said. Don't let him win, Crest said. He's ruined 4 horses. Don't let him win. She went directly to Cavan, not to the guard captain, not to any advisor. To Cavan, because he was the one who had said, come to me and we handle things together, and she had decided somewhere in the past 3 months to believe him. She found him in the map room with 2 senior advisors and a dispatch from the eastern border. He looked up when she came in, and whatever he read in her face made him dismiss both men without a word. Tell me, he said. She told him everything. The roan stallion, Martin Voss. The forged letter. The 3 council members. The second bell. He listened without interrupting. His expression barely moved. But she could feel the bond, the cold, controlled fury running through it like a current beneath ice. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. The document case, he said. Black, brass clasps. Yes. You got this from his horse? Yes. One nod. He stood, and the king mode settled over him. Complete, absolute, but different from the performed version. The real one. The one that had held a kingdom together for 9 years and meant it. I need Aldrich. He stopped, recalibrated. I need Captain Wren, and I need you to stay here. Cavan. Not because I don't trust you, he said, turning back. His voice was even and direct. Because if Voss sees you before we have the letter, he'll understand that the information came from somewhere he didn't account for, and he'll move before the second bell. I need him to believe he still has time. A pause. Can you trust me to handle this part? He's not sidelining you, Ajax said quietly. He's protecting the plan. There's a difference. She looked at him. Yes, she said. I trust you. Something moved across his face, the same thing that had moved when she'd said you can just say it. Like she kept handing him things he hadn't realized he'd been waiting for. I'll be back before the second bell, he said. He was back in 38 minutes. He came into the map room with Captain Wren at his shoulder and a black document case in his hand. And his expression carried the cold, precise satisfaction of a man who had removed a threat cleanly. Voss is in the cells, Wren said. The letter is confirmed forged. The ink is 2 weeks old at most. And one of the 3 council members he'd approached came forward voluntarily when he realized Voss had also been running a separate blackmail against him. He was relieved to have cause to talk. And Isolde? Sable asked. Cavan set the document case on the table. She didn't know about the forgery. She knew Voss was working to have you removed, and she wanted that outcome, but she believed it would happen through political pressure, not fabrication. He paused. She's not innocent, but she's not Voss. What happens to her? She returns to her father's house. The Western trade arrangements will be renegotiated without her family's seat at the table. A pause. It's not nothing. Sable nodded. Vesper says thank you, the mayor reported distantly. She's relieved. She didn't want her rider to be destroyed by this. She just wanted it to stop. Tell her she's welcome, Sable murmured. Cavan looked at her. Vesper? Isolde's mare. She's the one who first told me something was wrong. She was trying to protect Isolde the only way she could. Sable paused. She didn't want her rider used as a weapon. She just didn't know how to stop it alone. He was quiet for a moment. Then, with the expression she had come to recognize as his version of wonder, the controlled, careful kind that didn't announce itself, You have an entire network. I have animals who want to be heard, Sable said. It isn't that different from people. He looked at her steadily. No, he said. I suppose it isn't. The council meeting that evening was not what Martin Voss had planned. Instead of a formal review of the King's Mate bond, the council heard the evidence against Voss, the testimony of the council member he'd been blackmailing, and a full account of the forged letter. Lord Renwick sat through it with the expression of a man recalculating something fundamental about his own assumptions. When it was finished, he looked at Sable. You discovered this, he said. I had help. From the animals. From the animals. Renwick was quiet for a long time. The fire in the chamber hearth shifted and settled. My horse, he said finally, has been favoring his left leg. Nearly 2 weeks, Sable said. The stablemaster checked him this morning. Stone bruise, he'll recover fully with rest and poulticing. Another silence. How long have you been able to do this? Renwick asked slowly. My whole life. She held his gaze. I've been hiding it my whole life. Why? Because people are frightened of things they don't understand, she said. And I was an Omega from a mill town. I couldn't afford to be frightening. The old lord studied her for a long time. The weight of 32 years of council meetings sat in the lines of his face. I owe you an apology, he said, for what I said at your first appearance before this council. The room went absolutely still. You were right, Renwick continued, with the painful deliberateness of a man doing something he had very little practice at. About what the king needs. I have held my position on this council for 32 years, and I have never once brought Cavan a difficult truth. He looked at Cavan. She has been here 3 months, and she's brought him several. She is not a liability, Your Majesty. She is the most valuable person currently in this room. Renwick's horse, Ajax reported from outside, just said exactly the same thing. He says Renwick has been wanting to say that for 2 weeks. He just needed something to make it possible. Sable pressed her lips together, not to hold back a laugh this time, to hold in something larger. Cavan found her afterward on the east battlements. She had gone there without quite deciding to. She had learned, over the past months, that she went to high open places when she needed to breathe. The night was cold and clear, the stars very sharp, and below them the lights of Ironhallow spread out like a reflection of the sky above. He came to stand beside her. Close. The bond between them was warm and unwavering, the most reliable thing she had ever felt. Renwick apologized, she said. I know. I was there. He's never apologized to anyone. I know that too. A pause. His horse told you. Fig, actually. Who heard it from Renwick's horse? She paused. The network is fairly efficient. He made a quiet sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but was close to one. Then, I've been thinking about something. Tell me. When I was 22, he said, and I took the crown, I decided that the way to hold everything together was to never let anyone see the parts that weren't. I thought that was what strength looked like. A pause. I've been doing it for 9 years, and then you showed up in my stables and laughed at me, and I kept waiting to be angry about it. and I never was. Why weren't you? Because you weren't laughing at the king, he said. You were laughing at the situation. There's a real difference. He turned toward her. You've been seeing me clearly since the very first day. Not the crown, me. And I didn't know how much I needed that until it was already happening. The wind moved between them, cold and clean. I'm not going to be a perfect queen, Sable said. I'll get protocols wrong. I'll laugh at the wrong moments. I'll have conversations with animals that make the court deeply uncomfortable. I know. Renwick is probably going to have to keep apologizing to me because I'm going to keep saying true things in council chambers. I'm counting on it. You're not frightened of that? I'm terrified of it, he said. But you told me terrified and afraid are different things. She had said that. In a corridor before a council meeting what felt like a long time ago. Terrified means you know it might go wrong and you go anyway, she said. Exactly that, he said. Level 5, Ajax announced from the stables below, with enormous, settled satisfaction. I am declaring Level 5. There is nothing above Level 5. This is the ceiling. We have arrived at the ceiling. 9 years, and we have finally arrived. Sable laughed. Cavan looked at her with the expression that was no longer the architecture of a smile but the real thing, warm and entirely unguarded and wholly his. Ajax, he said. Level 5, she said. He says it's the ceiling. What does Level 5 mean? She looked at him. At the King of Ironhallow, standing on his own battlements in the cold, clear night, without the practiced jaw or the controlled distance or the star alignment speech, just himself, watching her with eyes that had stopped performing anything at all. I think, she said, it means this. She kissed him. Not with 14 seconds of entrance or a golden gown catching torchlight, just her hands against his chest and his arms coming around her, and the bond going from a warm thread to something vast and certain, like a fire catching and holding, like something that was always going to burn. From the royal stables below came a sound that was not quite a whinny and not quite a cheer, but was unmistakably both. Finally, Ajax announced, I have been waiting 9 years for this. 9 years of the speech rehearsals. 9 years of the shirt selections. 9 years. I want this recorded. I want recognition. I want Sunstone Valley apples, the good ones, not the ordinary ones. 10 per day. This is non-negotiable. I have earned this. Cavan pulled back just enough to see her face. Is he celebrating? Sable said. At volume. Of course he is. Also, Ajax added, in the tone of a horse playing one final card, I want it noted that I kept one thing. I never told her about the mirror. You're welcome, Cavan. Sable felt him go very still. What? He said carefully. Did he just say? He says he kept one secret, she said, keeping her expression perfectly level. He says you're welcome. A long silence. There was no mirror, Cavan said. Naturally not. I'm a king. I don't... Absolutely. Sable. She looked up at him. His expression was cycling through dignity, resignation, and something trying very hard not to be sheepish. How long? She asked. I have no idea what he's referring to. Cavan? A pause. 5 days. Possibly 6. She pressed her face against his shoulder and laughed until her ribs ached, and he held her while she did, arms solid and warm and entirely real, and after a moment she felt his chest move with it too. The real laugh, the one that had never belonged to anyone but him. Below them, Ajax finished his evening hay with the serene satisfaction of a horse who had done his work well. 9 years, he said, to no one in particular. But we got there. They were married in the first week of spring. There was a state ceremony later, the full formal occasion with the court assembled and the protocols observed, and Lord Renwick standing very straight with the expression of a man who had decided, with some effort, to be proud of something he'd initially opposed. But the one that mattered was smaller. Just the pack elders, Captain Wren, and the bond between them that had been real since a Thursday morning in a stable aisle, when the world had paused and Sable's wolf had said, "Oh, there he is." Ajax attended. This was not traditional. Sable had insisted. I am the reason this happened, he had said, when she'd told him. I deserve to be present. You're not wrong, she'd said. He stood in the courtyard in the pale spring light, wearing a wreath of white and yellow flowers around his neck, which he had accepted with considerable dignity and only minimal complaint about the ribbon. It's yellow, he said. I look like a festival garland. You look wonderful, Sable said. I look like a festival garland, he repeated. But I'll allow it. For today, given the circumstances. Cavan, standing beside her, looked at his horse with the expression of a man who had fully made peace with something. He's wearing the wreath, he said. He's wearing the wreath, Sable confirmed. I never thought I'd see that. He says you're welcome. Cavan shook his head slowly. Then he took her hand, and the bond between them settled into something that felt less like a thread now, and more like bedrock. The kind of thing that had always been there, waiting to be found, waiting for someone to stop moving long enough to stand on it. The posture, Ajax observed, studying Cavan with the critical eye of a horse who had been watching him for 9 years. I'll give him that. The last 2 months, the posture has genuinely improved, measurably. He says your posture is better, Sable said. High praise, Cavan said dryly. It is, Ajax said, with complete sincerity. From me, it genuinely is. The elder spoke the words. The pack witnessed. The spring light fell warm and clear across the courtyard of Ironhallow, and somewhere in the stables, Fig the terrier reported every detail to Devastation upon the field, who was afraid of geese but had extremely strong feelings about love, and to Lady of Endless Skies, who bit people but had wept twice during the ceremony and was refusing to discuss it. Sable heard all of it. She always would. And standing in the spring light with her hand in the king's hand and Ajax's commentary, a warm, constant presence in the back of her mind, she thought that this was the truest thing she knew. The world was full of voices that went unheard, and the ones willing to listen were never, in the end, alone. Well, Ajax said, as the ceremony ended and Cavan kissed her and the pack cheered and Fig barked and Devastation upon the field made a sound that was absolutely not a sob. That's done then. A pause. I'm not going to say I'm proud. That would be excessive. Another pause. But if I were the kind of horse who said things like that, he didn't finish it. He didn't need to.